Karen Mitchell couldn't help but smile as she looked out from her corner office, 30 floors above the bustling streets of San Francisco. The view was worth every penny of the outrageous rent her company paid, but money wasn't a concern anymore. Not since Codebreaker AI had become the hottest name in tech. At 35, Karen had achieved what most people only dreamed about. Her cybersecurity startup had just been valued at over $500 million, and investors were practically begging to throw money at her. All because she had created something truly special, an algorithm that could predict and prevent cyber attacks before they even happened. Ms. Mitchell, the board members are waiting in the conference room. Her assistant Thomas stood at the door, his tablet clutched nervously against his chest. Karen had noticed he'd been doing that a lot lately, that nervous clutching, ever since she'd fired his colleague for questioning one of her decisions. "Tell them I'll be there in 5. Karen replied, not bothering to turn around. The board could wait. Everyone waited for Karen Mitchell these days. She took one last look at the city below. From up here, everything looked small and insignificant. Sometimes she felt that way about rules too, small and insignificant when viewed from the heights of success. Karen smoothed her perfectly tailored blazer and made her way to the conference room. The moment she entered, the chatter died down. 6 pairs of eyes turned to her, a mixture of admiration and wariness in their gazes. "Good morning," she said, sliding into her chair at the head of the table. "Let's keep this brief. I have a call with the Pentagon in an hour." Rick, her company's legal advisor, cleared his throat. He was a balding man in his 50s who always seemed to be sweating slightly. "Karen, we need to talk about the new data collection practices. There are some serious compliance issues that—" "Compliance issues?" Karen cut him off with a laugh. "Or opportunities that nobody else has the guts to pursue?" Rick's face reddened. "The law is quite clear about the limits of data harvesting from users. What we're doing now goes well beyond what our privacy policy states, and frankly, beyond what's legal." Karen leaned forward, her voice dropping to a tone that everyone in the room recognized as dangerous. "The law was written by people who don't understand what we're building. By the time they catch up, we'll have set the new standard." "That's not how regulation works," Rick insisted, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. "It is when you're changing the world," Karen replied. She turned to VJ, her chief technology officer. "How's the government contract coming along?" VJ, brilliant but conflict-averse, seemed relieved by the change of subject. "We're ahead of schedule. The Department of Defense loves what they're seeing, but—" He hesitated, glancing at Rick. "But what?" Karen prompted, an edge to her voice. "The access they're giving us, it's unprecedented. We'll be able to see patterns across systems that nobody has ever had permission to analyze together before." "That's why they hired us," Karen said with a dismissive wave. "To see what others can't, or shouldn't," Rick muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Karen fixed him with a cold stare. "If you're not comfortable with being at the cutting edge, Rick, perhaps Codebreaker AI isn't the right place for you." The threat hung in the air. Nobody spoke for several seconds. It was Layla, the chief financial officer, who broke the silence. "The numbers don't lie, Karen. We're growing faster than any security firm in history. But growth brings scrutiny. We need to make sure our foundation is solid." Karen had always liked Layla. She was practical, focused on results rather than hypothetical problems. But even Layla seemed concerned today. "Our foundation is our technology," Karen replied, "and our technology is untouchable. Nobody else can do what we do." "The FTC has been asking questions," Rick said, sliding a folder across the table. "They've requested documentation on our data handling processes." Karen didn't even glance at the folder. "Send them the standard package. The sanitized version." Rick's eyes widened. "That would be deliberately misleading federal regulators." "That would be presenting our processes in terms they can understand," Karen corrected him. "Their forms don't have boxes for what we do because what we do hasn't been categorized yet." "Karen," Rick began, but she was already standing up. "Handle it." "Rick, that's what we pay you for." She gathered her things. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my call. The Joint Chiefs don't like to be kept waiting." As she walked out, she heard the low murmur of conversation resume behind her. Let them talk. None of them understood what it meant to be truly visionary. Sometimes being ahead of your time meant being ahead of the rules too. Back in her office, Karen sank into her ergonomic chair and pulled up the presentation for the Pentagon. Codebreaker AI's algorithm was about to get access to the most sensitive networks in the country. The military brass were practically salivating at the potential, a system that could spot digital threats before they materialized. What she hadn't told them, what she hadn't told anyone, was how her algorithm actually worked. It didn't just analyze patterns within the systems it protected. It reached out silently and invisibly, gathering data from anywhere it could touch. Private networks, personal devices, encrypted communications. Nothing was truly off limits once her code took root. It was this hidden capability that made Codebreaker AI so effective and so valuable. Her phone buzzed. A text from her brother Paul. "Turn on Channel 7 now." Frowning, Karen reached for the remote and switched on the wall-mounted television. A serious-looking news anchor was mid-sentence, raising questions about privacy and regulatory compliance in the tech sector. The Federal Trade Commission has announced increased scrutiny of cybersecurity firms, with particular focus on data handling practices. The screen cut to a press conference. The FTC chairwoman, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair, was speaking at a podium. Companies cannot hide behind technological complexity to avoid their legal and ethical obligations. We are particularly concerned about reports of unauthorized data collection by firms with access to sensitive information. Though no companies were named, Karen knew exactly what had prompted this. Someone had talked. Someone had gone to the regulators. Her phone rang. "It was VJ. Are you seeing this?" he asked without preamble. "I'm seeing it," she replied calmly, though she could feel heat rising in her neck. "Do you think they know about the real data sources? They suspect. They don't know. There's a difference." Karen watched as the press conference ended and the news returned to the anchor. "Find out who talked to them." "How can you be sure someone talked?" "Because the timing is too perfect. Right after we get the DoD contract, someone's trying to sabotage us." Karen's mind was already racing through possibilities. "Check Rick's emails. And Layla's too." "Karen." VJ's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "That would be necessary," she finished for him. "Do it discreetly. Use the backdoor protocol we built for the Moscow operation." There was a long pause before VJ answered. "Okay, but Karen, maybe we should consider slowing down a bit, just until this blows over." Karen laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Slow down? While our competitors catch up? Not a chance. If anything, we accelerate now. The best defense is a strong offense." After hanging up, Karen turned back to the window. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. Somewhere down there, people were making decisions that could affect her company. People who didn't understand what she was building. People who were afraid of the future. Well, she wasn't afraid. And she certainly wasn't going to let outdated regulations written by technological dinosaurs stop her from changing the world. Her computer chimed with an incoming email. It was from an address she didn't recognize, but the subject line made her blood run cold. "Codebreaker AI, unauthorized data collection evidence." Karen clicked it open. Inside was a single line of text. "The code of law applies to everyone, even you." Below that was an attachment, a detailed technical document outlining exactly how Codebreaker AI's algorithm reached beyond its authorized boundaries. Her own code, her own comments in the margins laid bare for anyone to see. For the first time in years, Karen felt something she had almost forgotten. Fear. Real stomach-churning fear. Who had sent this? How had they gotten access to her private development notes? As if in answer, a second email arrived. This one from Rick. "We need to talk. Now." Judge Eleanor Hayes has been assigned to oversee the FTC investigation into our practices. She has a background in both law and computer science. "This is serious, Karen. No more brushing it off." Karen stared at the name, Judge Eleanor Hayes. She quickly searched for information about the judge. What she found didn't reassure her. Hayes had a reputation for technological savvy unusual in the judiciary, and a zero-tolerance policy for what she called digital overreach. Karen's phone buzzed again with a flood of notifications. The story was breaking across all major tech news outlets now. Codebreaker AI was being named explicitly as the target of the FTC investigation. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was just another obstacle, another challenge to overcome. She hadn't come this far by backing down. When she opened her eyes, her resolve had hardened. They wanted a fight? Fine, she would give them one. and she would win just like she always did. Because Karen Mitchell wasn't just anyone, she was the woman who had broken the code, and no judge was going to prove her wrong. The next morning, Karen arrived at the office earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, the streets below mostly empty. She preferred it this way, having the building almost to herself before the chaos of the day began. But today, she wasn't alone. As the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, she saw light spilling from the conference room. Voices drifted down the hallway, tense and hushed. Karen paused, listening. She recognized Rick's worried tone and VJ's softer replies. There was a third voice too, Layla's, unusually sharp. "We could all face personal liability," Layla was saying. "The board is already talking about distancing themselves." "She won't listen," Rick replied. "She never does." Karen's jaw tightened. So they were having meetings behind her back now? She strode toward the conference room, her heels clicking loudly on the polished floor, announcing her approach. The conversation cut off abruptly. Three faces turned to her, startled and guilty. "Early meeting?" Karen asked coolly, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't remember seeing it on my calendar." Rick recovered first. "Karen, we were just discussing response strategies for the FTC situation." "The situation I pay you to handle," she replied, walking into the room. She set her bag down with deliberate slowness. "So what's the strategy?" The three executives exchanged glances. Layla spoke first. "We think we need to cooperate fully, immediately. Show them everything they're asking for and voluntarily correct any irregularities in our data collection." "Irregularities?" Karen raised an eyebrow. "You mean our competitive advantage? The thing that makes our product work better than anything else on the market? The thing that's potentially illegal," Rick said quietly. "Karen, I've been warning you about this for months. The FTC has teeth, and Judge Hayes isn't known for leniency with tech companies that play fast and loose with regulations." Karen waved a dismissive hand. "Judges and regulators always lag behind innovation. By the time they figure out what we're doing, we'll have established a new normal." "That's not how this works," Rick insisted, his face flushing. "I've spoken with 3 different law firms specializing in tech regulation. They all say the same thing. What we're doing with shadow data collection goes beyond any reasonable interpretation of user consent." Karen leaned forward, fixing each of them with a hard stare. "Do you know who I had dinner with last night?" "Senator Chen, chair of the Technology Oversight Committee. He assured me that his office sees Codebreaker AI as a national security asset. The Pentagon agrees. Politicians can't simply override the law," Rick said, though he sounded less certain now. Karen smiled thinly. "Can't they?" "History suggests otherwise." She straightened up. "Here's what's going to happen. Rick, you'll find the most time-consuming, technically complex way to respond to the FTC's requests. Drag it out. Layla, call our major investors and reassure them. VJ." She turned to her CTO, who had been unusually quiet. "Make sure the core algorithm is protected. Move it offshore if necessary." No one spoke for a long moment. Then VJ cleared his throat. "Karen, there's something you should know. The FTC already has more than they're letting on." Karen frowned. "What do you mean?" "Someone sent them documentation. Internal emails, code comments, architecture diagrams. Things that clearly show we knew our data collection methods exceeded legal boundaries." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Who?" Karen asked, her voice dangerously soft. "We don't know," VJ replied, not meeting her eyes. "But it was someone with high-level access." Karen looked around the table, studying each face. A whistleblower in her inner circle? The thought made her stomach clench. "Find out who it is," she said. "And until then, access to the core systems is restricted to the 4 of us." She gathered her things and headed to her office, shutting the door behind her. Her phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert. "Codebreaker AI under federal investigation. Tech wunderkind Karen Mitchell faces scrutiny." Karen cursed under her breath. The story was going mainstream now. She scrolled through the article, which quoted sources familiar with the company's practices describing potentially illegal data harvesting techniques. Near the bottom was a statement from Judge Eleanor Hayes, who had been assigned to oversee the case. "The digital realm is not a lawless frontier," the judge was quoted as saying. "Innovation is welcome and necessary, but not at the expense of established rights and protections." Karen tossed her phone onto her desk in disgust. Established rights and protections. As if the judge understood the first thing about cutting-edge AI technology. Her desk phone rang. It was Thomas, her assistant. "Ms. Mitchell, there's a delivery for you at reception. They need your signature." "Send someone to sign for it," she replied impatiently. "They insist it has to be you. It's from the federal court." Karen felt a chill. "I'll be right down." In the lobby, a stern-faced courier waited with a thick envelope. "Karen Mitchell?" he asked, though he clearly recognized her from the news. "Federal summons. Please sign here." Under the curious gazes of employees and visitors, Karen scrawled her signature and took the envelope. She waited until she was back in her private elevator before tearing it open. Inside was a formal court order. Codebreaker AI was to preserve all records relating to its data collection practices. All cloud servers were to be imaged and sealed, and Karen Mitchell was to appear before Judge Hayes in exactly 1 week for a preliminary hearing. By the time she reached her office, her phone was ringing again. This time it was Peter Huang, the chairman of her board. "Karen, tell me you have a plan," he said without preamble. "Our stock is already taking a hit." "It's a temporary setback," she assured him, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "We have powerful allies." "Allies don't matter if the evidence is damning," Peter replied. "The board is meeting tomorrow. We need to hear your strategy. A real one, not just bulldozing ahead and hoping the rules don't apply to you." The conversation left Karen seething. Even Peter was losing his nerve. She spent the rest of the morning fielding similar calls from investors and board members, each more concerned than the last. By lunch, she needed to escape. She told Thomas she was taking the afternoon off and headed to her favorite spot, a small, upscale bar with private booths where San Francisco's tech elite often gathered. The owner, Diane, greeted her with a knowing smile. "The usual spot? You look like you could use some privacy." Karen nodded gratefully and slid into a booth at the back, ordering a double whiskey despite the early hour. She had just taken her first sip when someone slid into the seat across from her. "Mind if I join you?" Karen looked up in surprise. The woman across from her was in her early 60s, with short silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. She wore a simple but expensive-looking suit and carried herself with unmistakable authority. "I prefer to drink alone," Karen said coldly. The woman smiled slightly. "I'll be brief then. I'm Eleanor Hayes." Karen nearly choked on her drink. "Judge Hayes." "The same." The judge signaled to the bartender, who brought over a sparkling water. "I thought we might have a conversation off the record before things get formal." "That seems highly inappropriate," Karen said, recovering her composure. "Shouldn't you be avoiding ex parte communications with someone you're about to judge?" Hayes shrugged. "This isn't about your case specifically. Consider it a professional courtesy. One woman who broke barriers to another." Despite herself, Karen was intrigued. "What barriers did you break, Your Honor?" "I was coding before women were welcome in computer science. Wrote my first program on punch cards in 1978. Later, I was often the only female tech specialist in a room full of lawyers who could barely operate their email." She sipped her water. "So I understand something about swimming against the current." Karen wasn't sure how to respond. She hadn't expected this judge to have a technical background. "What I don't understand," Hayes continued, her voice hardening slightly, "is why someone as brilliant as you would risk everything by ignoring rules that exist for good reasons." "With all due respect," Karen said, "most rules around technology were written by people who don't understand it, for problems that no longer exist." Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Is that what you tell yourself? That privacy rights and consent are outdated concepts?" "I'm building systems that protect people," Karen said defensively. "My algorithm has prevented major cyber attacks. It's saved billions in potential damages. At what cost?" Hayes asked quietly. "The road to dystopia is paved with good intentions and convenient rationalizations." Karen felt her anger rising. "You've clearly already made up your mind about me." Hayes stood up, placing a business card on the table. "On the contrary, I'm reserving judgment until I see all the evidence. But I wanted to look you in the eye and tell you something important." She leaned forward slightly. "I understand your code, Ms. Mitchell, both the one you wrote and the one you broke. Don't underestimate me in my courtroom." As the judge walked away, Karen stared at the business card. On the back, Hayes had handwritten a short message. "It's not too late to course correct." Karen signaled for another drink. "Course correct?" The judge was underestimating her if she thought Karen would simply roll over and admit wrongdoing. She had come too far, built too much. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from an anonymous address with just a video attachment. Karen opened it warily. The video showed her just a few minutes ago, talking with Judge Hayes. Someone had recorded their entire conversation from a nearby table. A text message followed. Insurance policy. Just in case you need leverage. Use wisely. Karen stared at the message, her mind racing. Someone was offering her a way to potentially compromise the judge. A clear ethics violation that could force Hayes off the case. It was exactly the kind of opportunity Karen would have jumped at yesterday. A way to fight back against the system trying to contain her. But today, something felt different. The judge's words echoed in her mind. I understand your code. For the first time, Karen wondered if she might be facing someone she couldn't simply outsmart or overpower. And that thought was more terrifying than any court summons. Karen spent a restless night turning over her options. The video of Judge Hayes could be her get-out-of-jail-free card, a way to force the judge to step down from the case. But using it felt wrong even to her. There was a line between bending the rules and outright corruption, and this would definitely cross it. By morning, she'd made her decision. She deleted the video and blocked the anonymous sender. Whatever happened next, she would face it on the merits of her case, not through blackmail. As she arrived at the office, Thomas rushed up to her looking panicked. Miss Mitchell, the FBI is here, he whispered. They have a warrant. Karen stopped in her tracks. Where? Conference room. Mr. VJ and the legal team are with them. They're demanding access to the main servers. Karen took a deep breath. This was moving faster than she had expected. Tell them I'll be right there. She ducked into her office first, quickly typing out an email to her private lawyer. Then she grabbed her company laptop and headed to the conference room. Inside, 2 FBI agents in suits were speaking with VJ and 2 members of the legal team. Everyone looked up when she entered. Ms. Mitchell, one of the agents said, stepping forward. I'm Agent Powell. We have a warrant to image and secure all servers containing Codebreaker AI's operational code and data collection modules. Karen forced a smile. Of course. We're happy to cooperate, though I should point out that our code is a trade secret valued at over $500 million. The warrant includes provisions for protecting legitimate trade secrets, Agent Powell replied. But we need access now. Karen looked at VJ, who gave a slight nod. He had prepared for this, setting up a version of their systems that showed compliance with regulations, a sanitized version that hid the true extent of their data collection. VJ will show you everything you need, Karen said smoothly. We have nothing to hide. As VJ led the agents to the server room, the company lawyer pulled Karen aside. This is serious, he said in a low voice. The warrant mentions potential criminal charges, not just regulatory violations. You could be personally liable. I understand the risks, Karen replied coolly. Make sure everyone sticks to the script. Back in her office, Karen checked the news. The story was everywhere now. Tech blogs were running detailed analyses of Codebreaker AI's likely violations. Mainstream news had picked up the human angle. Tech CEO thought rules didn't apply, federal judge set to prove her wrong. Karen grimaced at the headlines. The public narrative was turning against her. She needed to fight back. She opened Twitter and began typing. Interesting how innovation is rewarded with federal raids. Old rules can't contain new technologies. The real crime is stifling progress. Codebreaker AI, it's your innovation over regulation. Her finger hovered over the tweet button. Was this smart? Maybe not, but she was tired of being on the defensive. She hit send. Within minutes, the tweet was going viral. Some followers cheered her defiance. Others condemned her arrogance. Tech reporters were already reaching out for comments. Her phone rang. It was Peter, the board chairman. Have you lost your mind? He demanded without preamble. Antagonizing federal authorities while they're in your building with a search warrant? I'm defending our company, Karen shot back. Someone needs to make it clear that we're being targeted for being too successful, too innovative. The board is calling an emergency meeting, Peter said. 3 o'clock today. Be there, and for God's sake, don't tweet anything else in the meantime. Karen hung up and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. Everything was unraveling so quickly. Just a week ago, she had been on top of the world, the darling of the tech industry, courted by investors and politicians alike. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Rick, looking grave. "We have a problem," he said, closing the door behind him. "The FBI found our shadow servers." Karen sat up straight. "That's not possible. They're air-gapped and off-site. Someone gave them the exact location. They had a separate team hit the backup facility at the same time they came here." Rick's face was ashen. "They have everything, Karen. The real code, the full data operation, all of it." For the first time, real fear gripped Karen. How? Who knew about that location? Only the original development team, Yumi, VJ, Layla, and... Rick hesitated. "And who?" Karen demanded. "Tom Chen. But he left the company 2 years ago." Tom Chen. Karen hadn't thought about him in months. He'd been her co-founder, but they'd had a falling out over, of all things, ethical concerns about data collection. She'd bought him out and pushed him out of the company. Had he been nursing a grudge all this time? "Find out where Tom is now," she ordered. "And get our crisis team in here. We need a new strategy." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of crisis meetings, calls with lawyers, and damage control. By the time the board meeting arrived, Karen was exhausted but defiant. She walked into the boardroom with her head high. All 12 board members were present, their faces grim. "Karen," Peter began, "we've reviewed the situation with outside counsel. The evidence against the company and you personally is substantial. We can fight this," Karen insisted. "We have allies in Washington. The Pentagon still wants our technology." "The Pentagon has already suspended their contract," another board member cut in. "No one wants to be associated with us right now." "This is temporary," Karen said. "A storm to weather. In 6 months this will be old news." Peter shook his head. "The board has voted. We're cooperating fully with authorities and restructuring the company leadership." He slid a document across the table. "We're asking for your resignation, effective immediately." Karen stared at the paper in disbelief. "You can't push me out of my own company." "You own 20%, Peter said quietly. "The board controls the rest. We can and we will if necessary. And if I refuse, then we'll fire you for cause. The evidence of knowing regulatory violations is overwhelming." Peter's voice softened slightly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Karen. Resign, cooperate with the authorities, show contrition. It's your best chance to salvage something from this mess." Karen looked around the table, searching for allies, but found none. Even Layla, who had been with her from almost the beginning, wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'll need to consult with my lawyer," Karen said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning," Peter replied. "After that, we proceed with termination." Karen left the building in a daze. Rather than going home, she found herself walking aimlessly through the city as evening fell. San Francisco's lights flickered on around her, the bay gleaming in the distance. Her phone kept buzzing with messages and notifications, but she ignored them all. For the first time in years, she had no plan, no angle, no clever solution to her problems. She ended up at a small park overlooking the water. Sitting on a bench, she finally checked her phone. Among the dozens of messages was an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "An offer." Curious despite herself, Karen opened it. "Ms. Mitchell, I represent a consortium of private investors based outside U.S. jurisdiction. We are impressed by your technology and unimpressed by American regulatory overreach. We would like to offer you a position, heading a new venture with full funding and protection from U.S. authorities. If interested, reply to this message by midnight." Karen stared at the email for a long time. It was tempting, a clean escape, a fresh start. She could rebuild somewhere beyond the reach of Judge Hayes and the FTC, but it would mean becoming a fugitive. Abandoning everything she'd built here. And deep down she knew it would confirm every accusation against her. As she pondered her options, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Eleanor Hayes." Karen nearly dropped her phone in shock. "Judge Hayes? How did you get this number?" "That's not important," the judge replied. "What matters is that I know you received an offer from certain overseas interests. I strongly advise you not to accept it." Karen's blood ran cold. How could the judge possibly know about an email she'd received less than an hour ago? "Are you monitoring my communications?" she demanded. "That's illegal." There was a soft laugh on the other end of the line. "No, Ms. Mitchell. But the people who contacted you are under surveillance for various national security concerns. I'm calling as a courtesy, off the record. to warn you that taking their offer would transform a regulatory case into a matter of treason." Karen was speechless. "The choice is yours, of course," Judge Hayes continued. "But I believe you're smarter than that. I'll see you in my courtroom next week." The line went dead. Karen lowered the phone slowly, her mind racing. The judge was right, running would be a disaster. But staying meant facing the music, admitting she wasn't above the law after all. As night fell completely, Karen made her second difficult decision of the day. She would stay and fight, but no more shortcuts, no more lies. Whatever happened in court, she would face it head on. She stood up from the bench, a weight lifting from her shoulders despite the uncertainty ahead. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not the untouchable tech queen who could do no wrong, but the brilliant problem solver who had started Codebreaker AI because she wanted to protect people from digital threats. Somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of that mission. Maybe if she was lucky, she could find a way back to it, even if it meant going through Judge Hayes' courtroom first. The morning of the hearing arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that matched Karen's mood. She stood in front of her closet considering what to wear to court. Her usual power suit suddenly seemed wrong, too aggressive, too reminiscent of the arrogant CEO who thought rules were for other people. Instead, she chose a simple navy dress and low heels. Professional but subdued. She wanted to project confidence without arrogance, contrition without weakness. It was a delicate balance. Her lawyer, David Wong, met her outside the courthouse. He was one of the top tech attorneys in the country, with a calm demeanor that belied his fierce reputation. "Ready?" he asked, studying her face. "As I'll ever be," Karen replied. "What are our chances?" David gave her a measured look. "That depends on which Karen Mitchell shows up in there. The one who tweeted about innovation over regulation, or the one who's ready to take responsibility?" Karen nodded. She had resigned from Codebreaker AI the previous day, accepting the board's terms. Peter had seemed genuinely sorry despite everything. "We'll bring you back when this blows over," he had promised. "The company needs your vision." Karen wasn't sure if that would ever be possible, but she appreciated the sentiment. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and photographers. Flashbulbs popped as Karen and David made their way inside. She kept her head up, her expression neutral, ignoring shouted questions about whether she was going to jail. The courtroom was smaller than Karen had expected, with polished wooden benches and walls lined with law books. It was nearly full, mostly with reporters and tech industry observers. Karen spotted Vijay and Layla sitting together near the back. They gave her encouraging nods. She also noticed Tom Chen, her former co-founder, sitting on the prosecution's side. So he had been the whistleblower after all. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away. A side door opened and everyone rose as Judge Hayes entered. Up close in her black robes, the judge seemed even more formidable than she had in the bar. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her face serious but not unkind as she surveyed the courtroom. "Be seated," she said, settling behind the bench. "United States versus Karen Mitchell and Codebreaker AI Incorporated. This is a preliminary hearing to determine if there is sufficient evidence to proceed with charges of violating the Federal Trade Commission Act, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and various data privacy statutes." She looked directly at Karen. "Ms. Mitchell, I understand you have resigned as CEO of Codebreaker AI?" "Yes, Your Honor," Karen replied, surprised that the judge was addressing her directly. "And the company has agreed to full cooperation with investigators?" "Yes, Your Honor," David answered. "My client has instructed all former employees to provide complete access and transparency." Judge Hayes nodded. "Very well. Let's proceed with the government's evidence." What followed was, for Karen, the most humbling 2 hours of her life. The prosecutor methodically laid out the case against her, displaying emails, code comments, and design documents that showed she had knowingly programmed Codebreaker AI to collect data beyond legal boundaries. There were internal messages where she had dismissed legal concerns, board presentations where she had obscured the true nature of the data collection, and even a recording of her telling Vijay to find gray areas in the regulations and exploit them. It was all true, and seeing it presented this way, cold, factual, damning, made Karen wince. Had she really been so cavalier? So convinced of her own exceptionalism? When the prosecutor finished, Judge Hayes turned to David. "Does the defense wish to contest the evidence at this time?" David stood. "No, Your Honor. Ms. Mitchell acknowledges the factual basis of the government's presentation. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This wasn't the defiant stance many had expected. However, David continued, we do wish to address the court regarding context and intent. Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Your Honor, my client created Codebreaker AI with the genuine belief that she was building technology that would protect people from cyber threats. The algorithm's effectiveness was directly tied to the breadth of data it could analyze. Ms. Mitchell made serious errors in judgment regarding regulatory compliance, but her intent was not personal enrichment or harm to users. Intent is relevant for sentencing, counselor, not for determining if laws were broken, Judge Hayes replied. Does Ms. Mitchell wish to make a statement to the court? David looked at Karen questioningly. They hadn't planned for this. Karen hesitated, then stood. Yes, Your Honor, I would like to speak if I may. Judge Hayes nodded. Please approach the podium. Karen walked forward on slightly shaky legs. The courtroom fell completely silent. She had given countless presentations to audiences much larger than this, but she had never felt so exposed. Your Honor, she began, then paused to clear her throat. I won't contest the evidence. The emails, the code, the business decisions, they're all mine. I can't deny them or excuse them. She took a deep breath. When I started Codebreaker AI, I truly believed I was creating something that would make people safer. Our algorithm could spot patterns that humans would miss, could prevent attacks before they happened. That part was real, but somewhere along the way I started to think that the rules didn't apply to me, that because my intentions were good, or because my technology was innovative, I could ignore the boundaries that everyone else had to respect. I told myself that regulations were just obstacles created by people who didn't understand what I was building. Karen looked up, meeting the judge's steady gaze. I was wrong. The regulations I dismissed exist to protect people's basic rights, their privacy, their autonomy, their freedom from surveillance they never consented to. In pursuing my vision of safety, I trampled on those rights. I became the very thing I claimed to be protecting people from, an entity that believed its mission justified any means. The courtroom remained silent, but Karen could feel the weight of every gaze upon her. I'm not asking for leniency, Your Honor. I'm simply acknowledging my mistakes and taking responsibility for them. Whatever punishment the court deems appropriate, I will accept it. As Karen returned to her seat, she noticed something unexpected on Judge Hayes's face, a flicker of what might have been approval. Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, the judge said. Frankness is always appreciated in my courtroom, even if it comes belatedly. She shuffled some papers, then looked up. Based on the evidence presented and the defendant's own statements, I find sufficient cause to proceed with formal charges. However, the judge paused, studying Karen thoughtfully. Given the defendant's cooperation and acceptance of responsibility, I am inclined to consider alternative resolutions that might better serve the public interest than a traditional prosecution. The prosecutor stood up, looking concerned. Your Honor, the government believes the severity of these violations warrants the full force of the law. I'm well aware of the government's position, Mr. Taylor, Judge Hayes replied dryly. But the court has some discretion in these matters. I would like both parties to consider a settlement that includes the following elements: substantial corporate fines, a personal fine for Ms. Mitchell, a ban from serving as an officer of a public company for 5 years, and, most importantly, community service in the form of developing ethical AI training programs. She looked directly at Karen. Ms. Mitchell has rare technical skills. Locking her in a prison cell seems less productive than having her educate others about the line she crossed. Karen felt a surge of unexpected emotion. Not relief, exactly. The penalties the judge suggested would still be severe, but something like hope. A path forward that didn't end her career entirely. The prosecutor frowned. Your Honor, we believe a stronger message needs to be sent. The message, Mr. Taylor, is that actions have consequences, but also that redemption is possible for those who acknowledge their mistakes and work to correct them. Judge Hayes tapped her gavel. I'm not making a final determination today. Both sides will submit their positions on my proposed resolution within 1 week. We're adjourned. As the courtroom began to clear, Karen felt someone touch her arm. It was VJ. That took courage, he said quietly. Not courage, Karen replied. Just honesty, finally. She looked across the room and saw Tom Chen watching her. Her former partner gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning away. Outside, the rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds. The reporters surged forward as Karen emerged, shouting questions about her statement in court. "Ms. Mitchell, do you regret building Codebreaker AI?" Karen paused on the steps. "I regret how I built it, not that I built it. Technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way." A young reporter pushed to the front. "Judge Hayes suggested you might develop ethics training for other tech companies. Would you actually do that?" Karen considered the question. A month ago, she would have scoffed at the idea of becoming an ethics teacher. Now, it felt strangely right. "Yes," she said firmly. "If given the chance, that's exactly what I'll do. The tech industry needs to learn what I learned the hard way, that innovation without ethics isn't progress at all." As she walked away from the courthouse, Karen felt lighter than she had in years. The road ahead would be difficult. Her reputation was in tatters, her company gone, her future uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. Judge Hayes had seen something in her worth salvaging. Now she had to prove the judge right. 2 years later, Karen stood at the front of a packed university auditorium, waiting for the audience to settle. The room was filled with computer science students, tech industry professionals, and government regulators, all there for the final lecture in her ethics series, Code and Conscience: Building Technology That Serves Humanity. She still felt a flutter of nerves before these talks, though she'd given dozens of them by now. Each time she had to make herself vulnerable, sharing the story of her spectacular rise and fall. But that vulnerability was the point. It made her message real in a way that abstract ethical discussions never could. As the room quieted, Karen took a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming today. For those who don't know me, I'm Karen Mitchell, former CEO of Codebreaker AI and current cautionary tale." A light chuckle rippled through the audience. Her self-deprecating humor had become part of her new identity. 3 years ago, I was on the cover of tech magazines being hailed as a visionary. 2 years ago, I was in federal court, admitting to multiple violations of privacy laws and data regulations. She paused, letting that sink in. It's been quite a journey. From her spot at the podium, Karen could see familiar faces in the crowd. VJ was there, now running a smaller but ethically rigorous security firm. Tom Chen, her former partner and eventual whistleblower, sat near the back. They had reconciled after her case was settled, though their relationship would never be what it once was. Even Layla had come despite being busy as the new CEO of the restructured Codebreaker AI, a position Karen had eventually supported her for, knowing the company needed ethical leadership to move forward. Today, I want to talk about something that wasn't obvious to me until it was almost too late: the false choice between innovation and ethics. Karen clicked to her first slide, which showed the infamous tweet she'd sent during the FBI raid. "Interesting how innovation is rewarded with federal raids. Old rules can't contain new technologies." "I really believed this," she said, shaking her head at her past self. "I thought rules were obstacles to progress, that regulations were just the old guard trying to hold back the future. I convinced myself that because my intentions were good, building technology to protect people from cyber threats, I was justified in crossing ethical lines." She clicked to the next slide, a schematic of how Codebreaker AI had secretly collected data beyond what users had consented to. Our algorithm worked well because it had access to massive amounts of data, some of it gathered through proper channels and some of it. She gestured to the diagram. Not. I told myself and my team that the extraordinary results justified extraordinary methods, that we were special, different, above the ordinary constraints. Karen walked away from the podium, choosing to speak more directly to the audience. But here's what I've learned since then. Innovation without ethical boundaries isn't progress. It's just clever destruction. True innovation finds ways to advance technology while respecting human rights and dignity. She spent the next 40 minutes detailing the specific lessons from her experience: how to build privacy protections into code from the beginning, how to create meaningful informed consent, and how to establish ethical review processes that had actual teeth. As she neared the end of her talk, Karen pulled up a final slide. It showed Judge Eleanor Hayes's quote from the courtroom. The message is that actions have consequences, but also that redemption is possible for those who acknowledge their mistakes and work to correct them. I owe a great deal to Judge Hayes, Karen said quietly. She could have thrown the book at me. Most people expected her to. But she saw an opportunity for a different kind of justice, one that might prevent others from making the same mistakes. Karen smiled slightly. Judge Hayes and I have become unlikely allies in the push for ethical tech regulation. She brings the legal expertise, I bring the technical knowledge, and together, we've helped draft guidelines that protect users without stifling genuine innovation. She looked out at the young faces in the audience. Many of you will go on to build amazing things. You'll solve problems we haven't even identified yet. But as you do, remember that your code exists to serve real people with real rights. No algorithm, no matter how brilliant, is worth sacrificing that principle. After the applause and a thoughtful Q&A session, Karen found herself surrounded by students eager to talk more. She tried to give each one her full attention, remembering how dismissive she'd once been of people she considered less brilliant than herself. Eventually, the crowd thinned, and Karen noticed a familiar figure waiting patiently at the edge of the stage. Judge Hayes, now retired from the bench but still active in legal reform, gave her a warm smile. "Excellent talk," the judge said as Karen approached. "You've come a long way." "Thanks to you," Karen replied, meaning it. Hayes shook her head. "I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it." They left the auditorium together, continuing a conversation that had evolved over the past 2 years from cautious professional respect to genuine friendship. "How's the new project coming along?" Hayes asked as they walked across the sunlit campus. Karen brightened. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. We've got a working prototype of the ethical AI audit tool. It can scan existing algorithms for potential bias, privacy issues, and regulatory red flags. We're calling it Codekeeper." Hayes nodded approvingly. "From codebreaker to codekeeper, fitting." "The irony isn't lost on me," Karen admitted. "I'm using what I learned about breaking the rules to help others stay within them." "That's the best kind of redemption," Hayes said. "Not just saying sorry, but making things right." They reached a small campus cafe and found a quiet corner table. As they sat, Karen noticed a young woman at a nearby table giving her nervous glances. Finally, the woman approached. "Ms. Mitchell? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say thank you. Your guest lecture in my ethical computing class last semester changed how I think about my work." She glanced at the code on her laptop screen. "I'm building a facial recognition system for my thesis, but after your talk, I completely redesigned it to prioritize privacy and consent." Karen felt a warmth spread through her chest. "That's wonderful to hear. I'd love to see what you've done with it sometime." After the student returned to her table, Hayes gave Karen a knowing look. "Still feel like your court case was the worst thing that ever happened to you?" Karen laughed softly. "It was the worst thing at the time, but also the best in the long run." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "When I was running Codebreaker AI, I measured success by user numbers, growth metrics, and how many regulations we could cleverly sidestep. Now I measure it differently." "How so?" Karen gestured toward the student. "One person at a time making better choices than I did. That's a different kind of legacy, but I'm starting to think it might be more meaningful." As they continued their conversation, Karen's phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Peter, her former board chairman, asking yet again if she would consider returning to Codebreaker AI in an advisory role. The company had survived the scandal and was rebuilding its reputation under Layla's leadership, but they still valued Karen's technical vision. For months she had politely declined these invitations, feeling she needed more distance from her past. But now, with Codekeeper nearly ready for launch and her ethics curriculum being adopted by universities nationwide, perhaps it was time to consider it. "Something important?" Hayes asked, noticing her expression. "Maybe," Karen replied. "An opportunity to come full circle in a way." Later that evening, in her modest apartment, a far cry from the luxury penthouse she'd once owned. Karen sat at her desk and composed a careful reply to Peter. She would consider returning, but only if the company agreed to implement her ethical AI framework and submit to regular independent audits. She had learned that true innovation wasn't about breaking rules for the sake of it, but about finding creative ways to advance technology while respecting deeper principles.